Everybody, my guest on the show today is Bobby Demars. Bobby is the CEO and founder of Blind Barrels. Is one of the things he does, as we were catching up, as I always do with my guests that I don't know. We show up on a call and go, hey, like, nice to meet you. Let's go talk and record this for everybody. So I found out that Bobby does a lot more than that. And today we're going to talk about a lot about that. So Bobby, welcome. Good to have you here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, man. So you're coming in from California. I'm here in New York. So we got some time zone differences. We were recording this Tuesday, July 5th. And Bobby, I don't know about you, but I had a very relaxing holiday weekend, which included a Dead & Company show, as we were talking about. I had some family over. We had a party. And I woke up this morning and I didn't really want to work that much, but I was looking forward to doing the podcast because this is not work for me. How about you? How was the 4th for you?
Oh, man, mine was crazy. I had 80 family members in town for a family reunion. We hadn't had one in 27 years, so it was like,
wow.
We did 4 events in 2 days. So there was like a breakfast, and then I hosted the big kind of night party where we had like a whiskey tasting, and there's a couple people that we lost in the family last year, so I edited some memorial videos for them, and we just have a lot of creative, electric, big personalities. So when everybody gets together, it's just like, oh, the party's at 6, and all of a sudden it's 3 a.m, and I don't know. My kid's sleeping. I don't know what's happening. But then the next day we had 2 more events, and then we just carried it into 4th of July and had a big pool day barbecue into the fireworks. So it was 3 days of just, my wife wants to sleep for the next week, but she can't. So it was awesome.
That's awesome, Bobby. Well, you must be a popular person as running a whiskey company, as we're going to talk a lot about today. Popular for those in the family who like to drink whiskey, because you probably got a lot of good stuff available.
We have a few that don't drink. I'm curious, though, at the Dead show. So I haven't been to a Dead show, but I've been to a lot of fish shows. Mm-hmm. And how many spinners were there? Because every now and again, in the general admission, there's always a couple people on acid that are what I call the spinners. And they do the spin dancing.
Yep. I was actually over by the spinners. I'm not a spinner. If anybody's listening and knows about Grateful Dead or Dead & Co., and they do it for 4 hours straight. It's really unbelievable. They never stop spinning. I went over because there's a restroom near them. I want to say there was about 25 that were spinning, but as the night goes on, that crowd grows as well. You probably imagine why, but there's about 25 spinners. I went to the same show last year, and there was over 100 spinners. It looked like over 100 spinners. If you look at some of these Dead & Company shows now at like stadiums, like I was at a 15-person amphitheater, but if you look and they play like a SoFi Stadium, I don't know if they played at SoFi Stadium yet or not, but there's like sometimes like 500 people just spinning for 4 hours. It's really amazing.
I don't know if that's a particular drug. I don't know if you've ever smoked like salvia, but salvia is one of these drugs. It's kind of a psychedelic, and everything turns clockwise, and it's a very short lived. It doesn't last very long, but you almost people get hurt because they try to do cartwheels where everything's vision. And it's one of those drugs that they just haven't figured out if it's illegal or not. So you don't what the concentration is. But I've always wondered, I'm like, what are they doing where they want to spin the whole time? Because I've never done whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never. They don't really seem like they want to be talked to either. They're very intensely spinning and grooving to the music, which is cool. I mean, you know what? It's a vibe for sure. So this seems like a great way to kick off the podcast, Bobby, and ask you the first question is, what is something that you nerd out about?
Oh, man, I'm a massive movie nerd. So
oh boy, we're going to talk for the next hour about this.
I mean, I could, and the thing is, I didn't realize I was studying films when I was watching all of them so much, because when I went to college, so I went to USC on a football scholarship, and I was in the business scholars program there, and I had a girlfriend that was in the film school, and the only way, so I would literally get up at 5, I'd have to work out, go to business classes, football practice, all the way until like 7, and then the only way I could see my girlfriend was to go to her film classes. So I took like 10 film classes, but I wasn't in the class, and I'm like, wait, you guys get to watch movies and then talk about them? This is a thing?
Sounds amazing.
So then I got into film school there, and I eventually became a filmmaker, but, I didn't realize the aspects of just the aesthetics and the storytelling and the beats and just nuances. And I mean, I can talk about especially like 80s movies, but you can almost usually name a movie like pre-2010, and I can get you the year of the movie within like 1 or 2 years.
Oh
you know?
man, Bobby, like we could do we might have to have you come back on and just talk movies. I'm the same way. I'm a huge movie fan, and I also have this weird memory that if you named a movie, whether or not I've seen it, there's a decent likelihood I can name the year. There's a decent likelihood I can name at least somebody in it, and there's a okay likelihood I could actually name the director, even if I haven't seen it. It's really weird, and I always say, I wish I could turn that superpower into something that was profitable. It's like I could use in my business, because that skill is really useless.
We did this week with my sister. We were watching, showing the kids the movie Hook.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, oh, the little boy that plays, Peter Pan's kid, he's in 2 other movies. Can you name those movies? And it's like, yeah, he was also the kid in What About Bob? And he was also the nerdy kid in Can't Hardly Wait. At the end, like he had this interesting kind of, and he supposedly went on to become some doctor, biochemist or something, kind of like Malcolm, whatever, Blossom. I can't even say her name, but he had this whole history. But yeah, we do what movie is she from? And I was watching a movie with my sister, and she's like, that's the girl that was in the Parents Don't Just Understand video with Will Smith. And I'm like, no, that's not.
Wow.
There's no way you just pulled that out of nowhere. And sure enough, she was right. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, my sister has that ability too.
So anytime I have somebody on that's a movie, TV, music person, as they use that as their nerd out, which is my answer too. I've actually given this answers film under because somebody asked me my question because they thought they'd be clever. You have any great movie recommendations that you've seen in the last couple of years that maybe not everybody's seen, or something that you really struck you that's been memorable?
I mean, the only movie in the last few years that's just completely blown my mind was Pig. I don't know if you saw it. It's Nick Cage.
I did.
And I mean, this theme of grieving. I mean, it's just, people say it's like John Wick, but mental. And there's a little bit of that. It's this Portland underground. And I don't want to give too many details, but it's probably my favorite Nick Cage movie. Nick Cage is usually like, if you've seen Deadfall, or have you seen just where he's the cagiest of Cage, like in any like movie where he's just, I don't know, man. And he's crazy, or he'll do a weird voice.
The movie that's out now that's like a play on Nicolas Cage, being Nicolas Cage.
Oh, yeah. The unbearable weight of whatever. It's a play up on him. I thought that was okay, but to me, when I compare it to Pig, I'm just like, oh, dude.
It's very sad.
And, I mean, I think Nocturnal Animals and The Arrival was 2 movies that just blew me away. They were in the same year. Mm-hmm. And I go back to those again and again. And I would say lately, I mean, it's hard for me to find a movie that just kind of blows my mind. But what was the guy that created the TV show? There was 3 TV shows that came around at the same time: Devs, the OA, and Mr. Robot. I thought were just phenomenal.
Mr. Robot was super cool. I forget his name.
Ex Machina did Devs, but yeah, Mr. Robot was like, dude, that was so. And it's Christian Slater in it, right?
Yeah, Rami Malek, Oscar winner Rami Malek.
Rami Malek,
the main character. Yeah.
But just quality storytelling all the way through, and good, just killer music choices. And I'm kind of like a score snob too. Like I will listen to scores like just in the car. You know? I'll listen to weird movie scores or something like that. And
I love that.
What are we listening to? And I'm like, don't worry about it.
I'm going to prove, and I did not Google this. This is how my mind works. I heard Nocturnal Animals, and I heard Arrival. Arrival, like Amy Adams. Arrival, the Alien movie. John Ford and Denis Villeneuve, however you pronounce it, right?
I think it's Tom Ford, right?
Tom Ford, the fashion designer. Yeah. And then is it Denis Villeneuve who's did Dune?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Dune director and the new Blade Runner movie, and I mean he's kind of the new everything. And great. That movie just messed me up. The idea of that. Like, if we were to talk with aliens, it's like, well, we can't talk to our dogs, and they're pretty intelligent. They can understand us more. We can understand them.
That's true.
Or dolphins, right? Like, how do we talk to a dolphin? Or in this case, septipods, right? And and once again, I don't want to ruin the movie for you, but oh man, just what a
really good film,
a full circle, everything, and the Tom Ford one. The only thing is the movie opens with like these really enormous like heavyweight, like overweight women, like dancing nude in slow motion. and it's like I still don't know like how it's an art exhibit, and Amy Adams, right? Or Amy
Adams, yeah.
She's just one of my favorite actresses just in general, but she's in both movies.
She is,
but she's, I think, some art exhibit designer, and that was the art exhibit.
Mm.
And I don't know if it was like a metaphor for the emptiness of like whatever she's chosen in life or something.
Probably.
I don't know. Like, but I'm like, the whole opening is just kind of uncomfortable.
I don't remember that at all.
Super slow-mo of just really heavyweight women dancing in slow motion.
Interesting. It's the first time we've talked about this on this show. 130 some episode.
I know. We're going to talk about 500-pound women dancing naked in slow-mo.
All right, Bobby, this is another good lead-in to the next question I have for you. Is what's something that's inside of your comfort zone that is, is outside of somebody else's?
Oh man. I'd say going fast in cars.
Going fast in cars. You're like Dak Shepard.
Boats. Like I've gone 130 miles an hour in a boat before. And I think it's something that, most people, like once you start hitting 80, it gets really crazy. And I don't know what it is. I have my first car is a 72 El Camino, and it's a beast, and it's fast, and I just punch it all the time. Or, my buddy had the Porsche that has the button that makes it go from like 0 to 60 in 3.2. You almost like lose your vision, like your vision goes wide a little bit. Yeah. If I'm driving, I'm not worried. If someone else is driving, and if you get that, when you're the passenger and you're like, this dude's like right on someone's tail, I'll get a little nervous when someone else is driving sometimes.
That's like what happened to Paul Walker, right? He hopped in the car with his buddy and passed away.
Yeah. No, well, and that guy was a professional driver. So why wouldn't you trust that guy? If anything, you're like, push it to the limit. He was probably, who knows what was going on there. And I'd say taking risks. I'm the son of an inventor. My dad has over 200 patents. It took him, 30 years to become an overnight success. And being around a risk taker, a lot of people like the idea of starting a company. They don't realize just how much work and energy it takes to put into it, and that it is nonstop, and that when you fail at something and everyone knows about it, that is always a difficult thing. And when you're successful, especially with movies, when I make movies, I have like a brother-in-law or somebody that will be like, so 3 years after I make a movie, so you giving it up? And it's like, dude, I had to develop 50 things just to make that one thing. Like, I'll show you the pilots and the things that never, why don't I send you the script that has this big director attached that can't get made for some reason? And it's like, what does that really do? So I just don't have those conversations. But I don't think people understand fully until they take a risk. And it's not that you have to be creative. I call it the 4% rule. So imagine 20% of the people out there are really creative, right? Yeah. And then separately, 20% of people out there are risk takers. Now, they're not the same people most of the time. 20% of the people that are creative are risk takers, and 20% of the risk takers are creative. And it's usually about that 4%, that 20% of 20% is that 4%. But usually it's about taking the risk. It's not about, most of the people out there, at the end of the day, you just got to get lucky too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the timing, you get the best idea and not have it hit for whatever reason.
Yeah. Somebody doesn't open the email. You don't happen to meet that person at a bar, network. Yeah. Absolutely. So now, Bobby, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying we made a movie called Talk to Me, and it was kind of the first black art house film. And this guy's sitting, we were talking about Tom Ford. This billionaire owns all these fashion labels like Kate Spade and Jones of New York. This guy named Sidney Kimmel. And the movie's a true story about an ex-convict that talks his way out of prison and onto the radio amidst the civil rights movement. It's called Talk to Me with Don Cheadle and had Martin Sheen in it and Chiwetel Ejiofor. And I'm like, why did this old white guy, who's a fashion mogul, put all this money into this film, $17 million, right, to finance the movie? And a month before the movie came out, he bought Johnny Carson's house for like $50 million. And Johnny Carson is a thread throughout the film it's utilized as a passing time element. And ultimately they arrive at the Tonight Show in the third act. But he literally made that movie because he loved Johnny Carson. That's the only reason that movie got made.
Yeah. It's like you and I, I'm like, you know what? I'd like to do a GoFundMe. Here's $20, Bobby. He's like, 17 million. That's nothing. I'll go spend that on my wine collection.
I've done the Kickstarter. I did raise money for a documentary on a Kickstarter, and that's not fun either. You just hit the refresh button all day, and your stomach lining slowly erodes away while you're just like, why didn't my best friend contribute?
Yeah.
It's like you get let down a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, Bobby, other side of that question, what's something that is outside of your comfort zone that you know is inside of somebody else's? So risk-taking, creative projects, you know, all those things. What's something on the other side of that that you are like, nope, either you're not doing it or you don't like doing it, and you know other people that are like, that's in their sweet spot?
I mean, I think there's only two, I think, right now that are coming to mind. One would be swinging, like with couples. I just can't share my wife, and I don't know if I can share someone else's wife while that guy's watching me. The whole cuckold thing. I'm just, I don't know. I don't think I can do it.
Yeah, especially when you have children. Like, it's a tough thing to if your children ever find out.
Yeah, no, exactly. Actually, we had a reality show that we pitched that was called Hollywood Swinging, and it was a matchmaker. It was, think like Millionaire Matchmaker, but for swingers. And we never sold it. We got like to a pilot stage or whatever. Yeah. But I was always like sitting there talking to these people that were super normal, and I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. I'm not like. There's so many ways that I'm not into that. You know what I mean?
Have you ever seen? Are you a Curb Your Enthusiasm fan?
Oh yeah.
You ever remember?
I think I missed like season 6 through 7 or like 4 through 7 or something. I got to go back and watch
the season where Larry and Cheryl are celebrating their 10-year anniversary, and Cheryl gives him a gift of he can go and, you know, sleep with one woman one time. That's the gift she gives him. And of course, because it's Curb, it's the season with the producers where he's in the producers on Broadway.
Okay.
But there's a scene that's so good where he's talking about, I think it's from this season, where he's talking about cheating or having multiple women, you know, like multiple affairs. And he's like, I'm just not cool enough for that. He's like, I'm not the guy. Like, I'm not cool enough. I wouldn't know what to do. Like, it would be too hard. Like, I'd be the same way. I'd be like, which one are you? And like, what are your needs? No, thank you. Too much.
Yeah. I'd be like, you know, I can disappoint one woman, but not two. You know, I don't want to like, not that I'm always disappointed, but I'm like, you know, I think there's that fear. So there's a phobia to that slightly. Yeah. And thalassophobia. I don't know if you've heard thalassophobia, but it's the fear of like deep ocean and deep water just in general. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you've ever like just put goggles on under the water when you're in the ocean.
Sure.
But there's things swimming all around you.
Oh yeah, I've scuba dived. Yeah.
Realize. And so like I always imagine you're in a building that's basically like 3 miles high if you're looking at like the Marianas Trench or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's all this stuff, and you're just hanging your lower body into the top of this dark building, and all these things are flying around. And I mean, we know more about like space than we do about the deep ocean.
That's true.
You know, we don't even know like the movie. What's the movie where the Abyss, right?
The Abyss with James Cameron
down there. I mean, aren't octopuses just like aliens that lost their technology or something? You know, like they got to this planet and like, you know, they're super advanced. They got all this biotech and they can like move and they're just super intelligent, like at an insane level. But over time, they're like, our technology, we don't have enough resources to build the same tech that got us here. And then they lose their technology and now they're, you know, primitive species to us.
And now I believe there's that one octopus who I believe won an Oscar, or the filmmaker for whatever that Netflix movie was about his buddy the octopus or whatever it's called.
Oh yeah, My Teacher the Octopus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you watch the Boys on Amazon.
I don't. I've heard about it.
You don't have to be like a superhero fan. It's such a phenomenal. Like,
I've heard.
It's you know, you got this one superhero who can talk to animals. He's like Aquaman, right? But he like has all these sexual relationships with animals. So there's all this quasi bestiality going on, and they put up a little disclaimer at the front of some of those episodes, like some of the sexual encounters you're going to see are by the storyline consensual, so that there's not like it's not like an animal rape, like which is I guess some part of people in bestiality. That dog didn't consent to that, or whatever it is, or that octopus didn't consent to that, and they're like, and it is just CGI, so it's kind of tongue in cheek, but it's also like.
That is funny.
You know, I think they're getting ahead of cancel culture. Like, this guy can't be having sex with a dolphin. This is how do we know that dolphin
I will say,
yes?
Bobby, that this episode, I've done a lot of episodes. This episode is going in a different direction than any episode's ever gone. And I'm either wanting to follow this on the rabbit hole until we can't come back, or ask you the next question. I think I'm going to choose to ask the next question, and we might also have more to talk about. So give you 5 minutes to give a speech, and the whole world gets to hear it. What do you speak about, all of us, and what do you want us to do at the end of that speech? Or for you as a filmmaker, this is your 5 minute short. Like, the message in it, what do you want us to do? What do you want to speak about? What do you want us to do?
If I had a speech where everyone's actually listening to me, I would make a speech about listening. I think that's one of the things that we don't do enough of when we interact with people. I have an entertainment company called Sonderful Entertainment, and it's derived from the word sonder, which is a combination. It's a word that's just been added to the dictionary, but it was kind of a slang Urban Dictionary term for a while. Mm-hmm. It's a combination of wonder and somber. And it's the realization that we're all living these intricate lives and that play these interesting, subtle roles in each other's lives. It's actually very parallel to kind of what your podcast is about and talking to interesting people. Mm-hmm. And it could be somebody that you bump into at the coffee shop. It could be a flickering light in the distance, and almost like this infinite anthill that weaves into the underground, that we're all living these intricate lives. And if we take the time, everybody has a story. Everybody's worth listening to. Yep. We're in this very divisive period of just politics and just all the different things, whether it's we're kind of in a class war and we're becoming a plutocracy. And these are more objective approaches to all of it. And I can get along with almost everybody that has a different opinion than mine, mainly because I listen to them. And I think, whenever you take the time to get to know somebody and what you're doing, and you're asking questions, and I'm doing a little bit with you, I'm getting to know you. I think that's one of the greatest values, because we can learn a lot in many different ways, but we can learn the most from each other, I think.
I love that, Bobby. Yeah. And that makes sense that you would be a creative and an artist, a filmmaker, because that's another way that people can listen to a message. Not be listening. Yeah. Before we go to the commercial break, I just want to mention that that's a good point about we all have these intricate lives, because I agree, and it's easy to forget. Like, we're going to talk here for an hour and 20 minutes. You're going to do what you're going to do. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. We'll remember each other, but you've got a family over there. You've got businesses you're running. You probably have films you're looking to make. I've got a whole bunch of stuff I'm doing, but it's like not that present for me. And the thing I leave with here before we go to the commercial break is the remembering that we never know until we walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. I was told that by my grandparents growing up, is you never know until you walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And I think that this country would be so much easier to live in, and so much less stuff going on if we just remembered that. Suppose I feel like we're so myopic, myself included.
Did you ever see the short story The Egg?
No. What's it about?
And if you look up The Egg, there's a great video that the Kirkenspluten, whatever that YouTube channel that gives you informative things like, what would the aliens be like in 1 billion years? And the concept is that somebody dies, and they wake up, and there's this being, and you can call it God, you can call it whatever, and they inform that, hey, you died, and don't worry, it was painless, and your family's going to be okay, and everything's moving along. And it's like, oh, okay, well, now what? Well, now you're going to be reborn as a Asian woman working in the rice paddies in 600 AD. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm going back in time?
Oh, wow.
And it's like, no, well, time is all just a construct.
Like reverse,
and then after that, you'll be reborn again. And you'll be reborn again until you live every life that's ever lived on the planet.
Wow.
So you'll be Abraham Lincoln, and you'll be Hitler. And when you wrong somebody, you're really doing it to yourself. And there's something that's scary and enlightening about that, because it's like, oh my God, I'm all alone here. But then when you then evolve, it's kind of very Hinduism. Like, you then will evolve into this other species, this other higher power that then goes to where those other people are. And it's just this kind of out there concept, but it's fascinating when you think about, like, are we living these kind of interweaving lives with the same people over and over again? And what wrongs are we doing that are maybe perpetuating trauma in their lives? And whether it's us in another life or not, which is kind of crazy, but it's interesting, that, are we hurting ourselves in the process of when we're hurting other people, either directly or indirectly? I don't know.
Yeah. We're going to go to commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about one of the ways that you provide joy to the world. And I've alluded to it. You provide joy to the world in multiple ways. We're going to come right back after this.
The Talking to Cool People podcast is brought to you by Jason Frizzell Coaching. Jason works with amazing people who are looking to find and develop their passion and purpose and create their journey to wherever it is they want to go. Check us out at jasonfrizzell.com, Facebook, or on Instagram. Jason loves hearing from anyone who thinks it would be cool to connect, to be coached, or to be a guest on our show. Email him at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com or DM him on Facebook and Instagram. And now, back to some more amazing conversation on Talking to Cool People.
All right, Bobby. So what do we know about you so far? You are the founder and CEO of Blind Barrels. We're going to talk about Blind Barrels. You are a filmmaker. I mentioned this a couple times. You are a dad. You are not a swinger. I did not know that about you.
Not a swinger?
Not a swinger, at least not yet. There's always possibility for the future. What else would you like us to know about you? What would you like to share with all of us?
Another thing of what I do, I mean, the reason I'm able to take a lot of risks right here, I mean, the Blind Barrels is a whiskey company, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but our whole company doesn't have salaries. Our whole company is built to scale, and the reason I'm able to do that is I've been an independent SAT, ACT test prep instructor for the last 20 years. My partner's a neuroscientist. We do mindfulness. We do neurofeedback. We help kids with their essays. We talked before just about how everyone has a story worth telling. And the thing is, we're not all storytellers, but we all know a good story when we hear one. So how do we amplify somebody's story within that process? And it's something that I did to, I've always had the mindset, I don't want to just make a living. I want to make a killing. And I always thought that when I was doing test prep, it was this means of making a living while I was trying to make a killing in other things. And then I started making a killing within this respect because I was really successful with it. And not just because I had good methods, but because I connect to my students and I care about them and I motivate them. I mentor them. The moniker of a tutor sounds like I'm helping kids with their homework, but the reality is most of my students will remember me more than the majority of their teachers. And
sure,
I can't go anywhere with my wife out to dinner without running into a bunch of my students because I get to play a pivotal role in the catalyst for the rest of their lives. I just ran into a mom last week and she started crying because her daughter got into UCLA 10 years ago. But it ultimately set her on a path to where she is now, which is super successful. And so it's been a privilege to be able to do that. And I've had a backdrop in working with foster kids. We started off, my company was mentoring and tutoring 200 foster kids throughout Southern California. And so to me, it's been maybe one of the most rewarding things. And then the best role I've had, whiskey, filmmaking, and teaching, the best role has been as a dad by far.
Yeah.
There's something, I mean, do you have kids?
I do. I have two. I have a 6-year-old and a almost 2-year-old.
So that's like, I got a 6 and a 4-year-old.
There you go.
You're almost out of the diaper / wiping butts phase.
We call it the pure danger phase, when everything is a danger and there's no ability to protect yourself yet. That's the phase we're in with the little guy. Yeah.
No, well, that's what the thing about parenting that blew my mind. So my wife and I couldn't have kids traditionally, in the sense that, I mean, if it was 30 years ago, we would just be the couple that couldn't have kids. Yeah. And at first, my wife, she's like, well, let's check your sperm. So you can buy a sperm thing on Amazon, and you know what they do? They send you a microscope and you put your sperm on a slide. You go, and I'm like, baby, my swimmers are crushing it right now. It's not a problem with. I'm like, there's a lot of activity going on here. I'm surprised I haven't impregnated a lot of people at this point.
Oh my God.
And it turned out she had endometriosis and her stomach lining couldn't hold onto the egg. So we did IVF, in vitro fertilization, and we did it 12 times, and it was really expensive. And I mean, I can tell you a million stories related to IVF. You could literally do a whole episode on just that. Yeah. And so when we finally, my wife's niece carried both of our children. And I remember it was January 1st. My daughter was born at 5 a.m. on January 1st. And, you get the call 3 a.m. I had just had my eyes closed for an hour. And luckily,
or the niece said, "Hey, I'm in labor," or they called and say,
"Yeah, I'm in labor, and it's an hour and a half away. We're driving to Antelope Valley." And I just remember on the way over, because I wasn't around a woman that was pregnant all the time, that was this physical reminder of this literally, explicitly and implicitly growing fatherhood of like, I'm about to be a father. And it hit me all in the drive over, where I'm like, okay, there's this little thing that's going to be, we got to keep it breathing, and we got to keep it fed, and we're going to bring it home, and it's going to be very fragile. And then I started looking ahead. I'm like, oh, and then I'm going to be worried that they're walking, and that they're talking, and that they're making friends, and that they're learning, and that they're going to get into the college that they want to get into, and that they're marrying the right people, and that they're going to be up with their family. I'm like, oh my God, there's like this worry switch that went off. And I'm like, this never ends, because we become a parent. People are like, oh, it's the love you've never known. And until you have a child, you won't understand what real love is. And you know what? When my child was born, it was a lightning bolt that hit me, and it was what I thought it would be. It was this unbelievably pure love that I have for my kids. But what they don't tell you is that it's a worry that you've never known. And so now I'm constantly, because now we're in this other phase, and you're in part of that too, where now you're worrying about them to be being good people, which is another level of responsibility. Right?
Yep.
How to communicate, how to control your emotions around them. And you're going to have days where you feel like a bad parent, you feel guilty about it, and that's normal. And it's just this whole just roller coaster that never ends. And it's a lot, but I'm grateful for it at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome, Bobby. All right. I'm excited, and not going to lie, I'm a little fearful of what you're going to ask me about based on some of the things we've talked about today, but I will answer whatever you ask. Unless I tell you I won't. I've never not answered a question somebody's asked me on here. So, Bobby, what would you like to ask me about, since we're getting to know each other, that I can answer for you and for everybody listening?
I mean, I have two questions for you. One is, what made you want to create this podcast in terms of, there had to have been probably some catalyst and some aha moment, and not just, I have a good radio voice and I'm a good conversationalist, because you have both those things. But there was something, either somebody told that to you, or was there was it an idea that you had for a while, but then it just sprouted and then you decided, I'm going to jump in? Like, what was the impetus for this whole?
Oh yeah. Thank you for the question. I've never been told I have a good radio voice, and now I'm feeling very conscious about my voice. So thank you. So let me tell you the story of this podcast. When I was a kid, I thought Johnny Carson and then Jay Leno were super cool, because I think I'm 44, so I think it was about 12 when Johnny left and Jay came in. I just thought it looked like a whole ton of fun. I'm like completely extroverted. I was always a super talkative kid, not surprising. And I just thought it'd be really fun to like entertain people and talk to interesting celebrities. And I was like a huge sports kid, so you'd have like Michael Jordan on. I'm like, that's pretty cool that you get to sit and talk to Michael Jordan or Jerry Seinfeld, or these people that I thought were so awesome. And then as I got older, and I did not go into the arts because I just never thought about comedy or acting or directing or anything like that, or film. It just wasn't in my purview. I guess it could have been, but it just wasn't something I'd thought about as a kid. And so for 20 years, I worked in corporate sales. And then in October of 19, I was on my first podcast as a guest, and it was really fun. I don't want to listen to the episode again, because I don't think I was very good, as most people improve over time. But I remember getting done. I'm like, that was really fun. Oh, wait, I could do this. And you are up. I'm trying to think here, numbers wise. I do 50 episodes a year, and I've done 25 this year, or 24. So we're looking at about 125 episodes, and I've asked every single guest these questions that you're getting asked today. And I say that because when I came up with this list of questions, I literally don't remember it. Like it was a moment of like, what do I want this thing to be? And my two podcast heroes are Dax Shepard. I love Armchair Expert. And I love Mark Maron's podcast, WTF. Long form interview, pretty unstructured, talks to interesting people. And, do you listen to Armchair Expert at all?
Yeah, I haven't listened to Dax Shepard. I listened to that. I listened to Smartless. I listened to Fly on the Wall, which is kind of a new one with David Spade.
Yeah.
I love showbiz stories. And
yeah, totally. So one of the things that really inspired me about Armchair Expert was, and he had Carmelo Anthony on, the NBA player, and he said this again, and I remember he said it, but they talked about a little bit about basketball, but a lot of not about basketball. And one of his things is, and he always talks about he's an anthropologist. Like, that was his college degree, at least. That sometimes what people do is arguably the least important thing they do. And I just thought that was really fascinating. So I created this podcast. I came up with the questions. I put together a list of some people that I knew would say yes, because most podcasters do. Had some people on. And then you didn't ask this question, but I'll answer how the podcast got named. My 7th guest, I had recorded, I think, 10 episodes without releasing anything. And I'd said to her, what do you think I should call this thing? Because I had some other people give me some more like business stuff. I mean, it's not really a business podcast. It's more a long form interview. She's like, oh yeah, just like what it is, talking to cool people. I'm like, oh, that works. And that was how the title was, right? So it was like a really interesting thing. So that's why I did it. I started out, I said, this is really fun. I've iterated over time. I've still asked the same questions. I've added a couple things, upgraded my audio for those who are like, my avid listeners will hear my audio's better. But I've really expanded who I talk to as well. And I've really never said no to anybody unless they just want to come and pitch.
Has everybody ended up being cool? Or have you thought about having like a sub thing called talking to some pretty cool people?
You're like somebody's like, hey, I'd like to pitch to be on your show. And I'll be like, I don't know that you can be on the main Tonight Show. You could be on like the cable Tonight Show.
Yeah, it's like
back in the day.
Late show. It's the Carson Daly version.
Late show. No, everybody's been cool because I'm just a lover of people. Yeah, Rob, exactly. David Spade, Rob Schneider. But I find almost the way my questions are structured, plus the kind of people that want to be on a show like this, I've actually enjoyed every single conversation. I learned something every time. People ask me why I do this. I do it because I get to meet. We would never meet otherwise. Like, how would we meet? I mean, maybe we would, but it wouldn't be as easy for us to get connected. But what I love about this is I'm always learning. Every single episode, I'm going to learn about whiskey subscriptions. I'm learning about film. I'm learning about just all the things we're talking about today. And so that's why I do it. And I still do it. And, it's just a heck load of fun. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's really a strengths-based project for me.
It ties with my speech to the world that you're listening to everyone.
Exactly.
You're learning from everybody. And I do think that's one of the best things. I'm constantly learning, just like you said. And I love that. That's a great reason to have a podcast. And also, hopefully the listeners are getting the same thing out of it, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, I know how many people listen, and it's a decent number of people. So I hope so. Otherwise, it'd be a waste of their time. So you have a second question for me.
I have, the one that I actually thought of. I just thought about that one just right as we were talking, but this is one I was thinking of before we started. Was what do you think happens when we die?
Ooh, deep. I love it. Well, I'll answer this question by starting. So I was raised Lutheran in Minnesota. So I was raised in a very like typical Midwestern religious, like Christianity. This is an interesting question, Bobby, because I think about this now more than I'm a dad. I don't know if that's how it's gone for you, but
a little bit.
Yeah. And I just think about, not to get dark, but I think about these shootings that are happening, especially the school shooting from last month. And you go as a parent to think that that you'll never see your children again, that there's nothing else, just breaks my heart. And but this is where I really struggle with, is this whole idea of the afterlife invented by us as humans to give us some sort of thing to think about or hope for? And boy, there's been a lot of, there's whole college degrees around this, right? Like theology. And is this an invented thing? I believe there's something in the afterlife. I'm not exactly sure what it is.
We all find out, but none of us really know for sure, right?
Well, yeah.
Simulation. Is it? I think about. I was raised Lutheran as well.
Oh, you were?
Yeah. Nice. So, and it's interesting. My family, a lot of them migrated from Minnesota. Do you ever do a 23andMe?
Yeah, I did do 23andMe.
We might be distant cousins.
We might be, Bobby.
It's possible.
I might be getting a family reunion That'd be amazing. Like, Bobby, we've been on the podcast, and now I'm drinking whiskey with you.
We're going to have 280 people that we're just going to keep getting it larger.
That's funny.
But I thought, you raised – I mean, Lutheran what I liked about Christianity was the concept of a loving God.
Yeah.
But I'm a big believer in reincarnation.
Yeah.
And open to the idea that, that maybe God is a collective of all of our energy, and somehow the laws of the universe operate that way. And I don't know. I just feel like there are people that have been here before, and the concept of heaven just always seemed it never made sense to me. In first of all, my heaven isn't someone else's heaven, so is that a fabricated heaven?
Right.
That someone else then has to live in my heaven, so then that's kind of messed up. Like having all these virgins the way that some of the Muslims believe, or the hardcore Orthodox Muslims that you're gonna get 78 virgins. I'm like, have you ever been with a virgin? You don't want 70 of them. But it's a little of that. But
you're working on your stand-up. I like that. That's good.
Yeah, I would never do. I did stand-up one time, and I got banned from the comedy show, from the Comedy Store for a reason. I'll tell that story if you want to hear it.
That's another.
But I
do
look at
time.
kind of the whole just reincarnation thing, or even if like we're in some type of a simulation. Imagine we are these beings that can live forever, and the concept of forever would actually be very monotonous and boring. And there's this great Twilight Zone episode where this guy's like robbing somebody and runs across the street, and gets hit by a car, and he wakes up and he's in this all white room and everything's perfect. And there's a guy with a goatee that's like in a white suit. He's like, whatever you want, Mr. Valentine. So drinks, dames, money. But every time he shoots pool, they all go in. When he gambles, he always wins. And he finally gets to the point, he goes, look, Fats. And he calls the guy that, the angel, whatever. He's like, look, I'm tired of this heaven stuff. I'm just not cut out for this heaven stuff. Take me to the other place. And he goes, what do you mean, Mr. Valentine? This is the other place.
Right.
And it's like, the concept of having everything you ever wanted is a form of hell in and of itself.
Yeah, because there's no motivation. You don't have any humans. We like to have the we like some struggle and achievement. And if nothing,
that's how we grow. And being reborn again, whether maybe I need to work through some stuff as a unicell amoeba, I don't know if it goes into microorganisms or other dimensions or other whatever. I mean, all that's really interesting. I mean, you ever hear about DMT when people smoke DMT?
Yeah.
Like there's a documentary called The God Molecule, and it's a psychedelic. And when they synthesize, it's in every living thing. It's in, you can literally create it. I've never done it. I think I'm too scared to do it. But like to just pack my bags for that 15-minute hardcore trip, but they synthesized it and they injected like 15 people with it, and they all were like under doctor care in different rooms. And what was fascinating is they all had the same trip, where the room and their world would vibrate until all of a sudden they broke through some geometric plane where they saw these different shapes, and they felt like there were shapes that were kind of talking to them like in their head. And then all of a sudden they arrived and all the shapes stopped, and they arrived in what many described as a control room with aliens. And that it as foreign as that sound, for some reason seemed very familiar and very like home. And so the fact that everybody's having this like alien control room trip, that maybe it's some kind of a cheat code to the in between or the other side, or we're out of this simulation, or I don't know.
The last thing I'll say on this, and I should probably get an affiliate agreement with Armchair Expert at some point, but they did an episode. They have a Armchaired and Dangerous. It's like not even a spinoff. It's just part of the series, and they did one on simulation theory, which is really fascinating. And every time that at the end of the show, they do the Dax and Monica like talk about the show, or they talk about what they're up to. They always do a little thing called ding, 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 where they'll like say like, oh my gosh. And like, we had this guest on and they responded to this thing. And it was actually the thing that I had heard from somebody today. It's like ding, 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 like another proof point for the simulation. So who knows? I guess,
it could be. There's a documentary called Glitch in the Matrix, made by the same filmmakers that did Room 237, which is a documentary about The Shining and all the weird, crazy theories about The Shining. And I'm a massive Stanley Kubrick fan, so I was at the first screening ever of that at the midnight showing in Sundance when it happened. And then they did Glitch in the Matrix, and it's very weird in terms of the way they tell stories within the documentary, because they went into some really dark places, but really fascinating places, and it definitely makes you think half the time. And then half the time, I'm like, no, that sounds like bullshit.
All right, Bobby, great questions. Thanks for asking. I really appreciate both. Very thoughtful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So,
My
Bobby,
pleasure.
what are you passionate about?
I'm passionate about trying new things, and really, I'm really passionate about fighting for the underdog. A lot of people think passion means love, but the actual root of passion, the Latin root is pati, and it means to suffer. And so what that means is you're willing to suffer. You love something so much, you care about something so much that you're willing to suffer for it.
I didn't know that.
And so when, and that's where the Mel Gibson movie Passion of the Christ is from. That Jesus loved the world so much he was willing to suffer that. And not that I'm pushing that dogma, but that's kind of, if you were to tie the element of it, that whole movie is just a horror movie of suffering.
Yeah,
if you get yourself through it. And so I think all the things that I've done, I made a documentary called The Business of Amateurs, as a former college athlete, and I got to start for Pete Carroll and, have these amazing experiences. But I always felt that, the college athlete didn't have enough rights. And so I made a documentary that focused on the rights of the college athlete. So obviously the money, we talked about the money, sort of the disparity and the gap that exists within the system of where the money actually goes. And payers are paid. They're paid in the form of a scholarship. It's just they're worth well more than that. So there's a form of a cartel where they can control the supply by limiting the cost of the actual product, the athletes. We see it in drugs. Cocaine doesn't cost that much, but because they have all the cocaine, they can tell you what it costs.
That's right.
And then the academic integrity, a lot of these guys are forced into sociology or some major where they can get easy A's because it's about eligibility. It's not about actually, graduating or giving them an education, because you're really an athlete student. You're not a student athlete. And then the medical side of it, you look at these guys that are giving up their long-term health through chronic traumatic encephalopathy and these repetitive blows to the head. It's not all concussions, it's subconcussions. And I have long-term mental health issues from bashing my head into other people for a number of years. And I wanted to dispel that. And it wasn't easy to talk. I have a thing called panic disorder, which means sounds like I panic when something. I'm not panicky, and I can do live television or talk to a bunch of people, and I might get as nervous as anyone else. But it's a malfunction in the brain that's a part of the latent part of our brain where we used to be food for other animals, and they call it fight, flight, or freeze. Really, it's really fight or flight, but a lot of people freeze, and basically your brain malfunctions, and it's like a bad trip. If anyone's ever had a bad trip, either took too many edibles or did some mushrooms or something, and your brain malfunctions, and it's very uncomfortable when it happens, and you ride it out. And that's why I've been a big proponent of mindfulness. It's how I kind of combated that. But I had to be honest with that because I know there's a lot of athletes out there that suffer from this, depression or anxiety. So when the brain cells get hit, they don't die. What happens is they get shook, and then they eventually die in about 13 to 15 years, and they harden to what's called this tau protein. And that's the evidence after you die when they cut open your brain and find that you have chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Yeah. And so these guys that are struggling with depression and anxiety, most of them self-medicate and they overdose. So it's difficult for these guys to come to terms with something that is associated with their identity when they've done all these brave, strong, and insane things when it comes to just taking on all the things that you do as a high-level athlete. And the film went on to, so we really fought for the underdog, and we utilized it to pass a bill in California that allowed athletes to make money from their name, image, and likeness. And that competitive element spurred 12 other states to do the same thing. And then we got in front of the Supreme Court. I'm on the oversight committee for college athletes' rights, and got in front of the Supreme Court last summer. And now college athletes can make money from their name, image, and likeness. And it's kind of close the disparity in the gap by allowing these mostly poor people of color to make money. And people that go, well, I have student debt and they have a free education. It's like, well, okay, they're just worth more than you are. Like if you're a music artist and you have a music scholarship and you couldn't release an album, right? Or child stars, dogs get paid to be put in commercials, right? Their owner gets the money, but, all these elements, it's very capitalist. It's a part of the Venn diagram where, the left and the right coexist, you should be able to, make your worth. And that is a capitalist, idea.
Yeah. So it's supply and demand at the end of the day.
Totally. So I'm very proud of that that film. And now I'm doing it with distilleries through Blind Barrels. So Blind Barrels is basically, it's a quarterly subscription. And every quarter, somebody gets 4 samples of stuff that they would never be able to get any other way. So if you look at the liquor laws that exist since Prohibition, some say Prohibition never really ended. So there's a 3-tier system. Yeah, well, every state's totally different, and even cities and counties. I mean, it's a big mess. But the main federal law is it has to go from a producer to a distributor to a retailer, which is what we are. It has to pass through those things. And so what happens is there's 3,000 whiskey distillers throughout the country, and there's maybe 200 at your Total Wine or BevMo. Now, who gets that shelf space? Those are long-term relationships that have existed from those brands and those distributors, or people that actually pay off the boots on the ground that have the relationships with the retailers to get that shelf space. So you end up with these. First of all, not everybody that's making whiskey is making great whiskey, but of the ones that are, they're rock stars in 50 miles, and they're on the shelf space in there, but then they just die down. And so we want to create a model where we can uplift, showcase, and highlight really these small distillers that are making the best whiskey in the country that you haven't been able to try and couldn't any other way. So not only do you get a chance to have a blind tasting, discover what you like, let your senses tell you what you like, but you get discover. So once again, this is really about standing up for the little guy. If you look at it, the parallel of what the Business of Amateurs was about. And if you like a bottle in the lineup, you can buy it for the same price if you were at the distillery. So we really don't make a lot or any sometimes from bottle sales because we have fulfillment partners and we give shipping discounts. And so, you know, we might get a bottle for $36 and we're selling it for $50 and the shipping was really $7 more and our fulfillment partner gets 20%. And so all of a sudden, we didn't make any money on that. But it's to me, it's like, the curation of the samples, the blind experience itself. And really just access, being able to have access to these brands. I mean, if you just want to go get a bottle of Maker's Mark, get a bottle of Maker's Mark. Right. But it wasn't easy to come up with this model. My buddy was doing blind tastings during quarantine, and I'd done it with wine before. I'd never done it with whiskey. And, you know, I called him up after the tasting. You know, I was a little bit inebriated. You know, God was pulling on my cheeks a little bit. And I said, dude, this is a business. And he's like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, either this isn't legal, it's not possible, or maybe it's just complicated. And it turns out it was very complicated. So if you ever need an attorney, just so you know, you can do an hour-long consultation, usually with any attorney of any different trade. And so I did 16 of those with alcohol beverage control attorneys until I figured out how to do it. So the first 7 were like, you can't do this. And I'm like, okay.
So you got no's. They're like, this is illegal.
They're like, you can't. I'm like, I want to pour whiskey into bottles and send them out to people. They're like, you can't do any of that. And then I talked to one who was like, you know, this $900 hour attorney who represents like massive brands. And she was a partner in this law firm. She's like, well, you know what you could do? You could do this, but you can't do that. And I went, oh. So she kind of opened the door a little bit. And then I took that into the next meeting and the next one. Then we figured out a way to do it. And so it took 6-7 months to figure out how to do it, how to create our branding. And this is all, you know, being a filmmaker and educator, this is all new, you know, creating custom packaging, creating custom bottles and caps and labels and, you know, all of that. You know, the shipping box that the packaging then goes into, you know, all of these.
Let's see it. We're recording video today, Bobby. Let's take a look.
So this is the box that we have. You see, we got this awesome gold leaf, you know,
that's a really cool logo.
Every quarter, somebody gets a high-end box, and in each box is a tasting table, and you know our branding. You can kind of see the bottles that are in there, and each one of these samples, you know, is something that you wouldn't be able to get any other way.
Amazing.
And so once you go through the blind tasting, there's a QR code in the bottom, you know, right, and it then tells you everything about the brand, the backstory of the distillery,
that's so cool.
The mash bill, the makeup, the ABV, if you want to buy a bottle of it. And, you know, we're really proud of this in general because we're really kind of helping these, you know, since our first lineup in March, a lot of these brands have gotten a lot of recognition. They've won some awards. They've got other bigger podcasts that are talking about them. We've got whiskey clubs in our group that are doing barrel picks with them. We were talking to somebody from our June box that I said, yeah, we had a bunch of clubs do barrel picks from a few brands in our first one. And he said, well, hey, if that happens with this lineup, you know, we're happy to give you a commission for all of those. And I said, no, we don't want a commission. That's not really
Not the model.
why we're doing that. Like, no, we want this to be a good thing for everybody. We want everyone to win at the end of the day. We want our subscribers to win. Obviously, we want to win by having our subscribers stay in our club and getting to access. That lineup will never happen again. So
it'll never be the same 4 bottles.
It will never be exactly. So it's a one-off every single time. And I think what's really cool is because we can't have all this inventory we're sitting on, it's seasonal. So mid-March, mid-June, September, December, everybody that's a subscriber gets that same box at the same time. So friends, family, coworkers that are in other states, other region, we've had several subscribers that are like, I didn't even know my wife liked whiskey. And now we're doing this together, every 3 months. Or a father and a son that are in different states and they commit to checking in. And that's what whiskey is really meant to be shared. Yeah. This is much more about tasting than it is drinking. There's a mindfulness component to it about being connected to color and the aromas and the taste and the finish and all the different little pieces along the way and connecting to the spirit. And look, we always say you're probably going to like all of them, but you're going to fall in love with one or two.
Yeah.
And that are going to really, every single time people are like, wow, I didn't think I liked rye, but this was the best whiskey I've ever had. And I don't even like rye.
That's awesome.
How you do?
I can't wait to try it. How do you create the partnerships with the different distilleries? Because I know a couple people, I know somebody who runs a great distillery up here in the Catskills. Just curious.
You allowed to say which one?
Yeah. Catskills Distillery. It's called. They're great.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'd be super curious to, if you want to make an introduction. So a lot of this is very organic. It's somebody, we've had subscribers be like, you need to check this place out. And we reach out. Our distributor, who basically we have a bottling partner, passes through distributor to us. We have to hit all those different tiers, right? Yeah. And the reason we chose this particular distributor is they represent, 600 independent brands. And before we were even had a website and all we had was almost a logo and they believed in us from the beginning and were supportive. So we wanted to pay that loyalty back to them by having them play a role in our entire flow of our business. And so we had a lot of introductions that way. Now we have a lot of distilleries reaching out to us, which is really cool.
Sure.
And we have a lot of subscribers saying, you got to check these guys out. And so we'll reach out. And so what will happen is I usually have an initial talk with them and just tell them kind of how the process works. And I won't give you all the bits of how we kind of perform this whole thing legally. And then, and figure out a price point and then ultimately say, look, all right, send us some samples. In some case we can source it or we might already have a sample and then we blind taste everything. So nobody can buy their way into our lineup. I have a couple of guys that, are real whiskey nerds. I call them my whiskey wizards or spirits guides.
Whiskey wizards. That's good.
Yeah. They guide us through the process. And so, but they're great. They listen to everybody. Somebody that's in our June lineup, for instance, we did a blind tasting with a bunch of our investors and those guys, and everyone's different level of experts, novices. Our CFO doesn't even like whiskey really. He's not really a whiskey guy, but this one brand, he's like, this is so amazing. He's like, maybe I am a whiskey guy. He left and he went and he bought 4 bottles of it that day.
There you go.
So that had an influence. There was some sway there. And it's great that we picked them because they're becoming really popular now. They're starting to expand and grow. And we're helping be a part of that type of zeitgeist in that growth and ultimately helping marketing these brands. But if it doesn't pass the blind taste, then it doesn't end up in our lineup. And so that's what's difficult sometimes. You get these great distilleries, great people, but we don't like their whiskey. And we kind of
you got to stand behind anything you're putting in there. Last question around this before we start to wrap up is it legal in every state? Can you ship to every state?
No. So we have fulfillment partners that can get to certain states, but we don't ship to Hawaii and Alaska because it's just cost prohibitive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Start charging massive amounts for shipping, but it's like dealing with that is hard. There's certain states like Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee because they have their own whiskey trails that they don't allow certain things to come into their state. Or Oregon, you can only buy alcohol from a liquor store in that state. So certain states, it's just not allowed. It's not possible. Even if you have a fulfillment partner that has all these grandfathered licenses, can ship to certain places. Even if they're within that state, they can't do it. So there's all these elements, and can our distributor get to certain fulfillment partners that can get into those states? So we're in 42 states.
That's pretty good.
We're not in Oregon, all those ones that I mentioned, and then like Massachusetts and Pennsylvania. I think I mentioned those. I can never always like say them all in one swoop. It's like Hawaii, Oregon, Alaska, Kentucky, Tennessee, Massachusetts, and then there's two more, Pennsylvania, and then there's one more I'm not thinking of. I just won't be able to think of whatever that other one is.
Well, I just want to say this out loud because we're looking at each other and recording this as video, and we'll post this, but the packaging is beautiful. Like really, it's black and gold. The logo looks great. And that is a great thing that shows up in somebody's doorstep if they're a whiskey fan. So congratulations on launching this. This is a great pandemic business.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll tell you, for me, it is important when you get a box, you want to feel special. And I've been to subscriptions where they send me, with this corrugated box and some Fetty in there, and it's okay. But not only do we want people to feel like, wow, this is really special, but we want them to associate these smaller brands with Top Shelf. So our bottles are really thick. Our caps have a metal finish on them. The soft touch, the gold leaf, everything a part of that process that obviously is our brand, but we want people to associate this with not only just the Top Shelf experience, but a really cool experience too.
Yeah, totally.
There's something special about
it. Come on over tonight. I'm getting my blind barrels shipped to me this week. Let's do a tasting together. Like that's an exciting experience.
And look, there's enough whiskey in here that 4 or 5 people can share it. I'm a big dude, so I'm going to want my own box.
Bobby's like, there's for 4 or 5 normal people. For me, I like the box myself.
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy one box and look, I have one of my best friend who's in the club. He still has half of his March box and he's tried it 3 or 4 times now. He's making them last so he can go back and he can savor it. And then sometimes he really falls in love with something. He drinks it all and then he buys a bottle of it,
Yeah. That's super cool. What a great idea, Bobby. Well, congratulations to you, your partners, your investors. Have no doubt this will be a very successful business. I think it's much needed. I mean, this has obviously been going on for years in wine, but this is the first time I've heard of it in whiskey. And thank you for investing all of the money into those different attorneys and keeping going too. What a lesson!
Those were all free calls. Luckily, that was the beauty. Those were 16 free 1-hour consultations.
With 16 and you finally got it. And then you finally got it. Yeah, you make it happen. Then you're like, we're going with you.
I was trying to figure out, and there were like 3 that we liked, and then one was really kind of in our price range that ended up being our attorney and all that. And eventually our goal is to, once we get to a few thousand subscribers in whiskey, we're going to probably get into tequila and then into beer and wine. So we needed to crush it with whiskey first, just because it's so popular and there's so many different ways and mash bills that we can really show within a lineup. But the tequila is crazy.
I was just reading an article that tequila and mezcal are like the number 2 alcohol in the United. They're blown. Like tequila and mezcal are become very popular.
It's massive. Yeah, and it's interesting. All tequilas are mezcals, but not all mezcals are tequila.
There you go. I didn't know that.
Process. Just like all bourbons are whiskey and not all whiskey is bourbon, right?
Yeah.
Bourbon has to be made with corn, 51% corn, has to be in new white oak barrels, and it has to be American. It doesn't have to be in Kentucky. But tequila, I mean, you have your reposados and añejos and extra añejos, and you have your blancas and you have your jovens, right? But now you get your cristalinos, right? And then mezcals. I mean, there's 7 different categories. Not all mezcals are smoky, just like not all single malts are smoky. You know? So a lot of people think, well, I don't want something smoked. A lot of people use mezcals for cocktails because that smokiness mixes really well with the citrus, right?
So good. Yeah.
Whatever it's doing. But eventually we want to get into that. We love the educational component of the culture of whiskey culture in general. On our site, we have a masterclass on mash bill, whiskey history, tasting that's free for anybody. That even isn't a subscriber. You can go onto our site and learn about whiskey just because you want to learn about whiskey. You don't have to be in Blind Barrels just because we love the educational component, the culture of it that much.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, Bobby, just we're going to put URLs to the video. We'll put a URL to Blind Barrels. We'll throw any contact information for you as a way anybody who's interested, pop into the show notes here and take a look and click on it. Go check it out. It's like seriously really beautiful. I'm really impressed with the packaging and what you all have created over there.
Oh, well, thank you. And look, anybody that wants to jump on, use Whiskey 10 at checkout and you can get 10% off anything. If you want to give a one-off gift as a box, you can get 10% off that. If you want to do the quarterly, the annual, we've got some really cool shirts and tasting glasses, and we got a monkey hat that's phenomenal. That has been really popular. People have been ordering the monkey hat. Somebody just told me recently it's a chimpanzee, and I'm like, it's a monkey hat. Just let it go.
Is a chimpanzee not a monkey?
I don't know. Like
they're trying to be smart.
It's like the monkeys and the ape family and the chimpanzees. Like, I don't know.
Oh boy.
I'm like, yeah, I got into that. I'm like, oh no, it's a monkey for right now. Okay.
Yeah. That's awesome, Bobby. Well, as we wrap up here, I just want to tell you, I'm so glad we got a chance to connect, make this happen. So good to get to know you. 2 last traditions. I want to ask you a question, then I want to give you a request. So the question is, Bobby, how do you see the world?
I see the world as an opportunity, to learn and connect at the end of the day. It goes back to that concept of Sonderful, this realization that we all have these intricate stories, and trying to find out someone's story and what you can learn from it. Kind of basically what your show is doing. Mm-hmm. I do set out to compliment a stranger every day if I can.
Nice.
It's one of these, we receive compliments from our friends and our family and our loved ones, and sometimes it is lip service, and you can tell when it's genuine or not. But if you give it to a stranger that day, if you just say, "Hey, you got a great smile," and you just throw out a compliment like that, it can be a really bright moment in somebody's day and an unforgettable moment. And people have done that for me in my life, and that's where I was kind of inspired by that. And I can't say I honestly accomplish that every day, especially the COVID era where you can't even see people's smiles or you're not interacting as much. But everyone in Southern California can be very cold. And, so I try to offset that with a warm presence. And so I do see the world as an opportunity for learning and connecting.
Yeah. Well, that I do have a second question for you. It's very timely. How do you feel about USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten?
Everyone's like, oh, well, the Pac-12 in history. I'm like, well, it used to be the Pac-8, and it was the Pac-10, now it's the Pac-12.
And now the Big Ten is like the Big 18 or 9. I don't even know. I'm a Big Tenner, and
it's going to be
I think it's 14 or 15 now without UCLA. But it's
what's going to happen to the Big 10 and the Big 12 when they both have 20 teams, or there's 2 Big 20s?
Right? They're going to rename themselves That's why this SEC is smart. Right, they're just the Southeastern Conference, which means they could have 100 teams or 2 teams. Anyway, it's
get the extra large 40.
Exactly.
We'll get the super double big go.
There you go.
That I look at I think it's an awesome opportunity. Everyone's just got to get their big boy pants on, and we're gonna go play in the big house, and we're gonna play in Ohio State, and it's a great excuse for me to, it's a write off for me because there's a amazing whiskey trail in Ohio State. Middle West is in Columbus. I mean, I'm going to be going to all these places. I've always wanted to go to Michigan Stadium. Never been there. Ohio State Stadium. The chance to get to play these teams. I've never, there's certain places I've just never gone to, and I think it's a great way. I've been to Notre Dame many times, right? And it's just going to make everything stronger. Obviously, there's going to be more money now and more opportunity in that. So that's why they're doing it.
Of course,
because they get bigger TV deals by having bigger matchups. I think the thing I worry about is, are they going to increase the number of games the way that they've slowly been doing? There used to be 10 games, and now we're dealing with like 13 games. And with the playoffs, you're dealing with 15 games, and you're really shortening these guys potentially their ability to play more years in the league by increasing the chance for injury. I mean, have you ever watched a game where they didn't cart 1 or 2 players off the field?
Doesn't seem like it happens often. Doesn't happen often.
I mean, there's like a 10% chance that that you're going to get injured in a game. And I've been injured in games, so I know that I've been that person. I've been carted off, but there's all those different things. So I worry about that, about these guys maybe doing too many snaps and even shortening their lifespan by playing more games like that. So that's what I worry about. Football isn't going to go anywhere. One of the things about making the documentary that was difficult, because I'm very proud of what I did as a college athlete, and how did I really come to terms with challenging the institutions? Because the NCAA is the schools. It's a collective of the schools. It isn't this faceless, institution that makes all these decisions. No, it's a consortium of the colleges that ultimately bend the will of what the NCAA actually does. And the way that I kind of reconciled with everything is this is, I asked this rower, she said, well, this is what we do with our friendships and our family and our loved ones. We push those relationships to be better. So I love my school, and I can love them and still push them to be better in the way that they operate. And I'm hoping that these steps forward and the more money hopefully creates more opportunities for athletes, and rather than, keeps them from other pains and other things that might be down the road. And I'm hoping that it creates more opportunity.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you, Bobby, for being on. Last tradition. Thank you. Last tradition. Leave us with some authentic Bobby Demars words of wisdom, and keep it short and sweet. Should fit on a little Instagram post. What do you got for us? Be present. Whether you're drinking whiskey, whether you're watching your kids, connect to the moment, because that's what we really have. All we have is the present moment, and whatever you're doing, like in this podcast, when you're talking to somebody, be connected. Don't be thinking about the mistake that you just made. Don't be thinking about what's down the road. Be present in the moment that you have. It's an opportunity. I agree with that. And I would say, if you're receiving a Blind Barrels box that evening, you may want to think a little bit about how you're going to enjoy that whiskey as it comes in. Yeah, exactly. That's where you can think about it. Thinking about the next one. It's like my grandpa used to talk about dinner or breakfast. He's like, what do we have for dinner? I'm like, you're eating your breakfast right now, dude. I used to do the same thing. Well, Bobby, it was great to have you on. So good to connect with you. And I'd love to have you back on again sometime soon. Hopefully you'll come back with us. Yeah, we could do a whole one about movies. We could talk easily an hour about movies. All right. Take care, Bobby. Awesome. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and give us a shout out, or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.